Hi, everyone. John Michael Coppola here, and welcome to the Chicago Theater Makers Podcast, where we chat with the actors, directors, choreographers, designers, producers, music directors, lyricists, playwrights, and all the artists who make the Chicago area theaters come alive. We're so excited to have you here with us today. But before we get started, we just want to remind you to please like, subscribe to, and share this podcast with your friends and colleagues who you think would appreciate the conversations we're having. We'd be so grateful for your support in this way so we can continue to bring these stories for years to come. Thanks again for being here, and now, curtain up on today's episode. Today's guest is a Chicago-based theater artist, producer, and administrator, and the founder and executive artistic director of Glendenning Theatre Company. He studied theater and public relations at Indiana University and began his career in arts communication working for Cathy Taylor Public Relations, where he supported press campaigns for over 10 major Chicagoland theaters. As a performer, he cut his teeth in cabaret, appearing in the inaugural Tuesdays at 54 with Robbie Rozelle at 54 Below, and appearances at Don't Tell Mama. He also opened a private teaching studio where he offered instruction in musical fundamentals and audition preparation. In addition to his artistic work, he serves as the manager of executive operations and board affairs at Writers Theater, where he supports executive leadership, board governance, and institutional strategy. Finally, in 2025, he founded Glendenning Theatre Company to create musical experiences rooted in collective energy. Under his leadership, the company has produced multiple sold-out performances in its first 6 months with a focus on storytelling that centers on artistic excellence and audience engagement. I hope you enjoy my conversation with Chris Sciortino. Now let's go to the top of the show. Hi, Chris. How are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm well, thanks. Thanks so much for joining me here on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
We have a little tradition here on the podcast that we ask all of our guests at the very top to tell our listeners a little bit about where you grew up, a little bit about your training, and then finish up with your first theater experience. So I now hand it off to you.
Okay, I know I've been trying to figure out how to distill the background into something a little bit more palatable.
Take all the time you need.
Great. I'll start with sort of training. I went to Indiana University. Okay. I studied acting and directing and started there in 2019. So I got a good semester in before the world changed very quickly.
Yes.
So I, had all these dreams of going off to college and doing all these shows, and then things. I think it took like a year and a half for us to sort of get back to a full producing model. Mm-hmm. And at that point, I'd sort of decided, after doing so many movement classes from my bedroom, I was like, I think I'm gonna graduate early and just see what the world has to offer. Awesome. So I was able to work that out with credits, and before that, I grew up doing theater. I grew up on the North Shore of Chicago. I'm from Wilmette originally. Okay. And there's no shortage of highly competitive theater youth programs there. So I felt like I'd sort of gotten thrown into the deep end very early. And then it felt like anything after that was just, a piece of cake. Yeah. But started doing shows in 8th grade, did theater all through high school. We had a phenomenal theater department with amazing teachers. And that's what led me to college. Yes, I went to New Trier. So, cool. We were introduced to like Stanislavski and Meisner before I was like 17. And then I was getting back to college classes, starting where I did my junior year of high school. I felt so privileged to be able to, be interacting with actual acting theory while I was in theater classes in high school. So that was sort of where that seed was planted for me. I was exploring how much I liked performing, but also how much it stressed me out. And at the same time, I was learning what it was like to teach by having such phenomenal teachers. So that's what planted the directing bug for me. It's what planted the teaching bug for me. And I always had the performing bug. So that was sort of my high school through college, and then post-college. Ended up landing an internship in public relations right after graduation. I worked with Cathy Taylor at Cathy Taylor Public Relations. Was the best crash course ever to Chicago theater. I was working with 10 different equity houses in the city, and that led me to Writers Theater, where I currently work now.
And what was your first theater experience? What was the first thing you either stepped on stage to do, or the first thing you remember experiencing as an audience member?
I think when I was thinking back, my mom took me to see Beauty and the Beast on Broadway. I think it was maybe right when they announced that they were closing. I was maybe 5 years old. And so she grew up going to theater and knew how impactful it was for her. And so she thought, we'll go visit our friends in New Jersey, we'll go into the city. And I just remember sitting in that audience. There's nothing like Disney Broadway shows. I mean, it's just
Yeah.
a spectacle from start to finish. That was like even a couple years before I saw Lion King. And it was just every experience kept getting better and better. But Beauty and the Beast was the first sort of big mega show that I saw.
You were also a teacher for a while. Where was your teaching practice? Was it here in town? Was it while you were in school at all? Or
In COVID, I started a private voice and acting coaching studio. And so that's where I really started to sort of merge my acting brain, my singing brain, and then my directing brain. And I worked with, I think my youngest student was maybe fourth or fifth grade. So we were doing very basic music fundamentals. And then my oldest were auditioning for college. So
okay.
it sort of ran the gamut of introduction to music theory, introduction to audition technique. So I never want to qualify myself as a teacher because I have so much respect for classroom teachers and what they do.
Yeah.
It's very different. It was one of the most rewarding things that I've gotten to do. And to do that while I was still in school, even a few years after I graduated, it was something that it really filled my cup.
I know you've got so many other skill sets under your belt and on many hats that you wear. Do you prefer the teaching over all the others, or is there one that you would prefer to do if you could do it for every day for the rest of your life?
Yeah, that's a good, I feel like they all talk to each other in a way that it's hard to pick one. My theater admin brain talks to my teacher brain for lesson planning, and my performer brain talks to my teacher brain for trying to empathize with what that student's going through. And then, teaching sort of connects to everything else. I think teaching is for sure the most rewarding. Getting emails from students, even like a couple years after I've taught them saying, this is the role that I got. And thank you so much. I still remember singing this song with you. Like that will always be the most impactful to me.
Sure.
It is the most meaningful, I think, when I look at my career, just broadly. But I think they're also interconnected, that it's hard to say that I prefer one or the other. They all sort of fill a different need for me.
Yeah. It's funny you say that about seeing your kids sort of go on to do other things, and they contact you and say, oh, I remember when I sang this in your class, whatever. I directed and choreographed the production of Jersey Boys a couple seasons back at Timberlake Playhouse, and many of the kids in the show, I mean, they were all kids. They just recently graduated high school. They were still in college. And I had one guy, he was our Joe Pesci. He was fantastic. He had never played the role before, but just burgeoning in his career. And then, wouldn't you know, the following season, he was playing Joe Pesci at some regional theater. And I was so proud of him. I was so excited. He was like, well, you gave me the opportunity to play it the first time, because he was super great at it. And I was like, oh, this is not the last time he's going to play this role. So I appreciate hearing that from other people, that we can walk with our heads held high with a little bit of pride. Like, yeah, I gave that kid that little inspiration, or that their first start at in this role or what have you. And then they go on to do it justice and have success with it further in their careers. There's really nothing more satisfying than that. I think I agree with you.
And I know for me too, like all it took was a teacher to say to me, like, I see something, you know what I mean? Like there's a spark there. That's sort of why in my head, like when I think about who I've, looked up to my whole life, it's almost always been my teachers, because they can be your biggest cheerleaders. And when they are, it's super special. So that's also something that I'm so grateful that I get to sort of teach and be a cheerleader at the same time, and get to follow, these kids as, I think the youngest kid I taught now is like almost in middle school. And I'm like, oh my God, like it's so, in my head, she's, still a fifth grader during COVID, logging on during Zoom. And, now she's in junior high. So.
Wow. Any of those teachers you've had specifically that you'd like to mention here on the podcast that were most influential to you?
I think my three theater teachers in high school were the most impactful. Miss James Noonan, Miss Kirsch, and Miss Lynn. They ran sort of our acting department. Okay. And so I think the way they structure the curriculum, the way that they supported us, and the way that I'm still in touch with them today. So that's great. My voice teacher since high school, Dr. Brad Nitschke, he's someone who has taught me more about what it's like to be a performer just broadly, while building my voice from the inside out. Just really, my English teacher, Mr. Bond, from my junior year of high school, like he was an actor. So when we were reading Great Gatsby, I was talking to him about, different play versions, and then the musicals happened, and I emailed him about the musicals years later. So I think those are my big ones. I'm sure I forgot some. So if my teachers are listening and I didn't list them, so sorry.
That's okay. It's like getting a Tony Award or Academy Award. You've got all these names you want to try and get out before they start playing you off. It's okay. So, given you've had such experience as a director and a teacher and an actor, and as also, of course, as an audience member, any theater experiences that you can recall that were the most favorite, or something that was not a very good experience?
Yeah, as a performer, I also right before COVID, it's so funny. It's such a like before and after in my
Yep.
head, but
Yep.
Jessica Voss was doing a performance in Indianapolis. She was touring a show around the country.
Okay.
And when I was at school at Indiana, it was super easy to get up to Indianapolis. And then they usually partnered with, I think, the maybe Columbus, Indiana Symphony Orchestra.
Okay.
And they brought Broadway stars in and out throughout
Nice.
the year. And she is someone who I've been a fan of for such a long time. And um, maybe like a sort of super fan when I was a teenager going to see her in Wicked and waiting at the stage door. So I had adored her for a while, and she'd put out an audition posting saying, I'm going to invite a few guests to come up on stage and sing with me. And I sent in a video thinking like, there's going to be a million other people who want to do the same thing. And
Yeah.
2 hours later, I heard back from her and she said, I'll see you in 2 weeks. Let's do a rehearsal beforehand. And, it was a magical night. It's this beautiful venue in Indianapolis called the Cabaret. And I got to go rehearse with her before the show with Mary Mitchell Campbell, who's, Broadway music director extraordinaire.
Yeah.
And I just remember being whisked in and out. And then all of a sudden I was up on stage and, getting to sing with someone who is sort of a Broadway hero to you is, I think, something that theater kids would, die for. And so
Right.
getting that opportunity.
What did you
Getting
say?
that opportunity right before COVID was incredible. I sang "Shallow" from *Stars Born*.
Oh,
So
yeah.
it was
The movie with Lady Gaga and
and Bradley Cooper.
Bradley Cooper.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
And it was funny because I walked in, and it's so funny. I've been a bass my whole life. Like 8th grade, I was a soprano. My freshman year of high school, I was a bass.
Yeah.
And there are no musical theater parts written for basses. Maybe Gilbert and Sullivan, maybe super, super old stuff. But I'd walked in, and even Bradley Cooper, who you can hear has a lower voice, even that was still too high for me. And so I was trying to sing it. I hadn't gotten the sheet music ahead of time. And I just sort of looked at Mary Mitchell Campbell, and she was just like, "We're going to move you down a step." And I was like, "Okay." And it ended up being in the Lady Gaga key. And so it was just like, I was singing Lady Gaga, Jessica Voss was singing Bradley Cooper. And I was like, this is just the most insane turn of events ever.
Oh,
but
my God.
it
That's
was,
so cool.
it was a way that I think they could tell they were like, I think this would make him more comfortable. And it would like, I cannot thank them enough for how special that evening was and how sort of reinvigorated I felt in terms of performing after that night. So
That's super
I think
cool.
that's my favorite. Yeah.
That's such a great story. Now, you mentioned that this was in this place called the Cabaret. You also did some cabaret for a while earlier in your career. We just did a couple of episodes last month. Last month was National Cabaret Month, even though they celebrate Chicago Cabaret Week here in May for Chicago for lots of different reasons. So I'm curious, we learned during those episodes that performing cabaret is very different than performing theater. So what made you want to go into that genre?
I like how few rules there are.
Yeah,
I felt
okay.
like as when I was acting and I was focusing more on wanting to do musicals and plays, you read a character description, you read a monologue, and often you're sort of put into a box right away to say, okay, well, you're going to do this character for 2.5 hours for 4 weeks.
Yeah.
With cabaret, every show can be different. You can close with one song for one performance, and maybe the late show you want to go out with more of an 11 o'clock number. There's so much you can do with the structure and so much that you can do to make the performance more connected to who you are. And that's what appeals to me the most is how can I take magic that I found in different parts of theater and sort of bring it all together into one number. And I think that can really elevate the performance in a way that outside of a cabaret space in a book musical, it's hard to capture in that same way.
Yeah.
It's just you and the music, and that very rarely happens.
How long did you perform cabaret?
I think I've done maybe five now. I mean, it was just sort
Okay.
of a post college, I'd gone really into an admin mindset, and so performing became more of a hobby until I realized that it could be both. So I done my first one in 2019, right before I went off to college. I was a guest at a show at 54 Below called Tuesdays at 54 with Robbie Rozelle.
Okay.
He assembled four, open mic up and comers to sing, and that was my first time sort of tasting what it was like to be on stage singing a song I wanted to sing, acting it the way I wanted to, and having the audience just be right there in the palm of your hand. And so after that, I directed a solo show for myself in college. And then since college, I've produced three cabarets now as part of my new theater company, Glendenning Theatre Company. So it's sort of whisked me into this world of now full-time producing.
I find it fascinating too, because you are a bass vocalist, and if you're creating your own work, I'm assuming that meant you could choose songs that have been written in any key and adapt them to your voice, or did you really try and concentrate on songs that were written for the bass voice?
I love the sandbox of transposing. Like I think more
Amazing.
people should do it. I don't really understand why we're so like, everyone has to sing an F5. Every
Right.
tenor has to sing a high A. Like, I think it's so restrictive in a way that you end up not really being able to cast the best performer. You just cast the best singer.
Yeah.
And so sometimes those are the same, sometimes they're different. But for me, what I always did in high school and when I was sort of learning what theater was, is I would listen to all these Broadway leading ladies sing these songs, and I would go, well,
Yeah.
I can do that. It's the same track. I'm just singing the octave down. So that's like where my foundational, every voice lesson I went to, I'd bring in like, I think one time I brought in like Rose's Turn, and my teacher looked at me and was like, okay, like age, gender, life experience, vocal range, like where are
Yeah.
we going with this?
Yeah.
And that's the fun of like I call cabaret a sandbox. That's why I talk about how much I love cabaret. Was it's just you can do what you want.
Yeah.
If I wanted to, I could transpose Santa Fe from Newsies down from, I think he holds a B at the end. Like it's all DIY. It's all personalized. It's more tailored to your artistic preference than anything else.
What's the most creative song that you've done in a cabaret that people were sort of blown away that you brought to the table? If you had to pick one, there may be a few, but if you had to pick
If I
one.
had to, I know I'm trying to go through my like Rolodex of songs. Well, the one song that I sort of live and die by is The Wizard and I from Wicked. That song is like,
Yeah.
the minute that I saw that show, I was like, this is it. Like, this is the song that I think perfectly sets that character up for the rest of the show.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw so much of myself in Elphaba singing that song when I was, 16 or 17.
Yeah.
I'd come out a few years before, and so much of that show I was self-identifying with what it means to come into your own, and the fear of what if people find out, but then realizing that there's people out there who will make it all okay. And that song, I think I brought that into a voice lesson too, and my voice teacher was like, yeah, let's do it. And then I took it into high school, and they said, sure, you can do it. And then I took it to New York, and they said, yeah, you can do it there too. So it's one of those songs that I think has just carried me through the whole process.
That's
But it's
incredible.
not what you would expect if you saw my name on a cabaret listing. You would not think that song was coming next.
Of course not. I really would love to hear it in a key that's accessible to a vocalist like you, because it really could just put a whole different spin on it. I've always been of the mindset, and maybe there are those that agree or disagree, that the key of a song brings different emotions to the audience. I did a production once. The show was Company, actually. I was playing Bobby, and the key for Being Alive was, the way it was written was quite low in my register. And I just felt like I couldn't emotionally connect to it, even in the scene, because I felt like his emotion is way higher than this key alludes to. And I feel like the audience is not going to grasp the emotional impact of this moment if this in this key. Can we change it? And they did change it. It wasn't a very large band, and didn't take them a whole lot of resources to change it. But the minute they did, it was completely different.
Yeah.
So I would be really interested to hear the Wizard and I in a bass vocalist voice, because I think it would create a different emotional impact, but not for the worse, just different. And
Yeah.
I want to experience that.
Well, and that's what's so interesting and why I'm so happy that, I took piano for so long was because when you're able to sort of speak that language within the music itself, you focus less on, well, this is what it says. You can sort of grow beyond that.
Right.
And what's so funny is I don't even change the key for Wizard and I just sing it the octave down, and people will come to me and go, well, what key was that in? And I'm like, the original. It didn't change. It's the
Fantastic.
same. And so it's all about, like you said, it's that voicing and how it sounds in different people's registers. You can
Yeah.
have something just as compelling and just as demanding and just as exciting, three steps down for one performer as it is in the original key with another one that's just sits more readily at their disposal. So I
Yeah.
think that's, if there's anything cabaret's taught me, it's that don't be afraid to transpose,
Yeah.
because it can work wonders. And even for folks who, you know, maybe they're perfect for Mama Rose, but that last note's just too high. A half step or a full step isn't gonna
Yeah.
it's not going to take away from anything. So as long
Yeah.
as it is feeling true and real to the actor and the performer, I think that's the most important part. So,
Incredible. Wise words. Thanks for sharing that. So now
of
you mentioned
course.
that you had a lot of administrative experience, worked for Cathy Taylor many years, and now you are the manager of executive operations and board affairs at Writers Theater. I'm curious how that all came about for you, that opportunity.
Yeah, Writers Theater was one of our clients when I was working at Cathy Taylor Public Relations, and growing up in Wilmette was so near to Glencoe, where the theater is.
Sure.
So in high school, I was on their youth council. I was able to sort of explore the artistic world of the theater. I remember we got to see David Cromer directed a brilliant production of Next to Normal there. And anyone's first interaction with that show, I mean, it's incredible, but to see, veteran Chicago director, veteran New York director take on that work, with one of my friends in high school at the time was in the show. It was just, it made me really appreciate that a theater of that caliber was in my backyard,
Yeah.
and sort of emphasize the importance of, not only Chicagoland theaters, but regional theaters in general. And so I knew sort of then, and then once I was working in public relations, that I wanted to live in this world of Chicago theater.
Yeah.
And I was lucky enough that once my tenure with Cathy Taylor was wrapping up, that Writers had posted a position for an executive assistant. I threw in my application, having worked in an agency capacity at a regional theater, but never fully in a nonprofit directly. Um, and I went in and they were like, yeah, we'd love to have you interview. And I was like, oh, okay. And so I showed up and I interviewed with my current bosses, Kate LaPuma, the executive director, and Braden Abraham, the artistic director. And I left and I was like, you know what? I left it all there. I was about to go to Italy for 2 weeks with my friends from college as like a graduation thing. I was like, this is going to be whatever it is. And regardless, I'll be drinking Aperol Spritz in Venice in the next 2 weeks. And so it was actually while I was drinking Aperol Spritz, I got an email that was like, we would love for you to join us once you're back from your trip. And it has been the biggest blessing because I will always champion executive assistants. I think they are the lifeblood of any organization that is lucky enough to have one. They cross departments. They know pretty much everything that comes across everyone's desk and handles it in a way that I think is just, it's so important to have someone focused on cohesion, especially at an arts institution. And so I was lucky enough to sort of get my administrative skills then. And last year was promoted to be our manager of executive operations and board affairs, to take a little bit more ownership over our administrative department, and then also navigating our board of trustees. We have about 25 trustees, and I coordinate all of our board operations and stewardship. So it's quite an undertaking, but it's been, I think, my favorite job I've ever had, because it's really taught me how to run a theater from the box office to the executive team to the marketing department. Everything has to exist in a level of harmony that's not always easy, but it's always there.
Yeah.
So that's how I ended up doing what I'm doing now.
Well, which of course is a great transition leading us into Glendenning Theatre Company.
Yes.
Starting a new theater company is not for the faint of heart. So since you had all that background, I mean, that gives you an idea of what goes into all that. But what gave you the impetus to decide to want to take that leap to start your own company? And I'm curious where the name Glendenning came from because it's not your last name.
No,
So I'm curious to hear all of that.
it's it's not even. I think I looked it up, and in Scottish it means like a beautiful hill or something.
Okay.
But where I grew up on Glendenning Road.
Okay.
And it was in my parents' basement when I was in eighth grade, ninth grade. I started sort of smuggling different things from Home Depot into the basement, and wooden planks and speakers and poster board that I would cut out, and I ended up building this sort of stage that was it had lights, it had a fog machine, it had portals, it had all this stuff that
Fantastic.
I had just decided that was what I was claiming my old playroom to be. And for Christmas I got a sound system that I hooked up that day, and the rest of Christmas Day I was doing Broadway karaoke in the basement. But um, that that energy that I still don't really know what made me want to do that. It didn't really make a whole lot of sense, but I would ask all my friends to come over, and of course, all my friends were theater kids, and so they were like, "Can we come to the stage? Are your parents home? Can we sing?" And so I would have my friends come in, and I would pull up these karaoke tracks, and my big magnum opus was figuring out how to do like a flying rig for Defying Gravity, and I would have my friends come over and stand. I know it's crazy, and so
It's genius, is what it is. It's
but
genius. You were
but
ahead of
that
your time.
energy, it was so like I feel like I was going crazy because I really wanted to do it, and I wanted to make sure that anytime that if I was going to start a theater company, I knew that it was going to have an element of that built into it, and I
Yeah.
wanted a name that was going to remind me why I started it in the first place. There's a big conversation broadly in the nonprofit space about mission drift,
Uh-huh.
whether that means a mission's too specific or too broad, that you start to lose the real reason why you're doing things.
Hmm.
And that word Glendenning, just sort of perfectly encapsulated for me. Like, remember the basement, remember the fog machine, remember all the stuff that your dad helped you drive back from the Home Depot in Northbrook. Like, all of that will sort of bring me back to that core of what it means to love doing theater and love doing music. So that's where it comes from.
That's incredible. Sitting here having a whole vision of like your mom saying, "Chris, you have to clean up your room." He's like, "I can't right now. I'm in tech." Like it's hysterical.
Well,
Like
and
in the basement. It's so funny.
I remember like going on Amazon, and I found like a $50 like projector that was like maybe this big,
Yeah.
and I was like, we're making the leap. Like, we have our LEDs, and now we're going to have projections too. So it just was, I was really living in my own universe. And I think, honestly, I mean, to kind of go back to your question, like, why start a theater company?
Yeah.
I had, I've been sort of working professionally now for 3 or 4 years, and I was getting, it's existed to an extent in my like Google Drive in a spreadsheet for probably 5 or 6 years now. And personally, with the way the world is headed, it felt like everything was falling apart, and
Mm.
it made me go, oh, I should wait. Now is not the right time. Like, other things deserve my attention. I need to focus on my actual job. And I
Yeah.
realized after 6 or 7 months of saying that if it's not going to get any better, then why wait till it's worse? You know what I mean? And so I woke up September of 2025, and I was like, I think it's time that I share this with somebody. And we made our first social media post in October, and did our first show in December, and then another one in February, and we have another one coming up in May. So it's rolled on since I decided to just hit the go button.
Congratulations. Where are you guys operating out of? Like you're not performing in the basement anymore. I'm
No,
assuming.
luckily we've risen up in the world, only one story, but still.
It's okay.
we have done 2 shows at the Uptown Tap Room in Uptown. It's
Okay.
right off of Wilson and Clark.
Okay.
It's a lovely community space. They do a lot of stand-up comedy. And so when I called them and I was like, can I do a musical theater show in your back room? They were like, there's no door. So as long as you're fine with that, because they're used to sort of the stand-up club vibe.
Yeah.
And so we did 2 shows there. Both sold out within 24 hours because there's only 25 seats. So it
Okay.
just, it moved quickly. And now our next show will be at Bramble Arts Loft up in Andersonville.
Oh yeah, that's a
So
great space.
it's beautiful. I toured it a couple weeks ago for the first time, and it's sort of hidden in plain sight. It's just
Yeah.
the most amazing space up a staircase from the understudy. So
Yeah. And nice that they have a few different spaces in that loft. Oh, that's exciting. What's the next thing you guys are doing in May?
we're doing the Theater Kid Olympics. So
Okay.
I've gone to some trusted artist friends and new folks to ask them, what song did you do in like a high school show that you think is funny? And then if you had to go to the Jimmy Awards and if you had to sing it when you were 7, like what would you have picked as your finale competition song? And spoiler alert, everyone wins. But it's a great program that I have had rehearsals this past weekend, and we have our big group rehearsal this next coming weekend, and it's going to be a knockout. So,
Oh my
and that's
God.
been the most fun, is giving people the opportunity to sing things that, they don't really get called into rooms to sing all that often.
When is the show open? What are the dates? What days of the week when it's running? Tell us all the details.
It's super exclusive, one night only.
Oh,
So we'll be only May 1st. But tickets are still available for that show. And then we've got another Pride Cabaret benefit coming up June 18th at the Den. We'll be announcing our entire next season. So there's more than one opportunity to see us in the next couple months. And then you'll get a bunch of dates for the next year on June 18th.
where can people find tickets for that before we forget to mention it?
Tickets at glendenning.org/what's on.
Okay.
Yeah.
Glendenning.org. And we'll have, of course, the ticket link in our show notes for the podcast. So if you're listening, please go navigate to our show notes and you can click on that. Otherwise, visit please glendenning.org/what's on. Is that what you said? What's on?
Yep.
Fantastic. I'd like to ask, what are some of the biggest lessons you've learned in your career, whether it's be administratively, as a teacher, as an artist?
So many. I think the first lesson that I think I learned very early on was always ask. If you have a question, if you want to do something, if something's not immediately coming to you and you just need someone to help you talk through it,
Yeah.
always ask. And if the answer to that question is no, do it anyway. So, it's less of asking for permission and more asking for support. I think
Yeah.
that's been sort of the lesson. Anytime you're working in nonprofit theater and you're an administrator, you're a producer, you're constantly asking for support from everyone. You need support from your actors, you need support from a venue, you need support from funders, from your staff. And there's some times that you're going to encounter a roadblock that makes you go, oh, well, never mind. I should just pack this up and go.
Yeah.
And what I've learned is that you just don't stick
Yeah.
around, find another way. As long as you're not hurting anyone or being a dick, then I think just do it,
Why not? What's the
Yeah.
worst that could happen? It's just doing theater,
Exactly.
That's what I like to remind myself sometimes, to get a little caught up in things. And at the end of the day, that's why it's called play. We're having fun. We're playing. We're having a good
Well,
time.
and my roommate works, she's a social worker in a hospital, which I cannot imagine a more important job, but we'll be watching The Pit together and I'll be like, is this what your day is like? And she's like, yeah. And it makes me, I do play pretend for a living. Like that's truly, and that's not meant to diminish theater at all, but just to sort of remind myself and, my actors or my designers, like, we're all here to do the same thing and we all love the same thing and we all have a ton of support behind us. So that can take the stress out of so much just by grounding ourselves in that. So you're right. It's play. It's fun. It's sometimes pretend. It's sometimes really real, but that's how I stay sane through all the craziness.
Where can our listeners find both you and Glendenning Theater on social media?
I'm on Instagram at CW Sciortino. I assume my name will be spelled out so I don't have to repeat it. And then on Instagram, Glendenning is Glendenning Theater with an R-E. Our website is glendenningtheatre.org. We have a YouTube that's up and running. You can just look up Glendenning Theater.
Fantastic.
And if you're interested in support or getting involved, if you're an artist, if you're a designer, if you're an actor, you can email me, chris@glendenningtheatre.org, and I will get back to you.
Amazing. Anything else you want to mention before we wrap up?
Just thank you so much for doing this. It's so I discovered this podcast a few months ago, and it's been so nice to hear more stories from every corner of theater. And it's so, I'm appreciative to be able to share a little bit about my story, but I know so many people are grateful to be able to just get shout outs of the amazing people who work here in Chicago. So thank you for all you do. It's really fantastic.
My pleasure. It's an honor, and I'm having the best time doing it, meeting people like
I'm
yourself,
sure.
and lots of theater companies that I was never even aware of. And so there are so many, and grateful that there are so many, because that will keep us busy in the coming weeks and months and years, we hope. So thanks for joining me here, and thanks for reaching out about being on the podcast as well, because otherwise we wouldn't have ever met.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us at the Chicago Theater Makers Podcast. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. The Chicago Theater Makers Podcast is a production of Spirit Art LLC, and our podcast theme music is by Paul Langford. If you or someone you know would like to be a guest on the podcast, please drop us a note at our website, ChiTheaterMakersPodcast.com. That's ChiTheater, makers with an S, podcast.com. We hope you enjoyed spending time with us as much as we enjoyed spending it with you, and we'll see you on the board soon.